The Senior Bowl is in the books, and that means it's time for us to take our first look at the 2026 draft class for the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the #1 sports podcast network in the land. I'm Jake Liscow, co-host of this show. James Rapien with me today, along with Mike Renner, the CBS Sports lead draft analyst, who we've talked to over the years, has been a great resource for us to figure out what's going on in these NFL drafts, where he's watched about 200 times the amount of players that I have at this time of year, maybe 100 times. I've watched 2 players so far, Mike. You tell me how many times more players you've watched than me at this point. Regardless, he's got a big board over there with CBS Sports and was helping with the Shrine Bowl this year. So we'll get a lot of great insight today from who helped themselves the most at the Senior Bowl from Mike, and a little bit of the general texture of this draft class, the depth, the strengths, the weaknesses will be some of the topics we're exploring today as we take our first look at the draft. Shout out to the everydayers. Welcome back on into another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Appreciate those of you who make us part of your daily routine. And Mike, let's start with the Senior Bowl, because that I think is the most recent high profile event. Now we're into Super Bowl week at this point. The Senior Bowl for some people is ancient history. That was last week at this point, but a whole bunch of players seem to pop on to a lot of people's awareness for the first time, made themselves some money potentially in Mobile. So I have 2 questions for you. One, who are some of the examples off the top of your head that have helped themselves the most at the Senior Bowl in the past? And like, how much do you think they helped themselves? Did they go from like round 3 to round 1 kind of thing? And 2, is there anybody that fits that category for you this year based on your read of how things went in Mobile?
Oh, gosh, put me on the spot there with the years past. I feel like every draft class, just after it's done, I just like wipe it from my memory. So like right off the top of my head, no one came to mind in terms of Senior Bowl rise. Actually, one guy that I think really is the best case scenario, or like he really rose up through Senior Bowl and then it translated to the NFL. I think Terry McLaurin was probably like one of the biggest guys in that regard, just because he was kind of an afterthought at Ohio State, goes to Senior Bowl, had an awesome week at Senior Bowl, probably went from a day 3 pick to an early 3rd rounder. And then obviously you've seen his career in the NFL. So it to me matters more. There's like a few positions where it really does matter. O-line, D-line, wide receiver, cornerback. Linebackers maybe a little bit, and tight ends also. But if you're a running back, if you're a safety, if you're even a quarterback's down there, I don't think it's super insightful. This year, though, right off the top of my head, the guy who I thought probably had the best Senior Bowl was Malachi Fields from Notre Dame. I'm not being a homer, because actually on tape at Notre Dame this year, I wasn't super high on him. I think some of that was the limited route tree he ran there, but at the Senior Bowl, he was bar none the best wide receiver there. And now probably the top, I want to say like 6 on my board at least, were not at the Senior Bowl. So a lot of the top guys opted out this year. There were really not a lot of true first rounders who were down there. Agents have kind of ruined this whole process. That's a topic for another time though. But Malachi feels like he was either, whether it was his ball skills, whether his ability to get it open, his physicality, like he was awesome down there as we get Senior Bowl. I think this could push him to a top 50 sort of draft pick with the week he had.
I love that you start with a wide receiver, especially because I know Bengals fans are really thinking about wide receiver this time of year. What do you dislike more, the Cincinnati snow or the agents this time of year?
The agents. The snow, there's like still some positives, right? You can go sledding. Right now it's pretty brutal though. My dog hates the snow, so he'd probably say the snow. But for me, it's the agents. They've ruined this process. They ruin a lot of the processes that they get their hands on. But that's, again, I could go on and on. That could be a full show. We could talk about my loathing for agents. Not Brad Spielberger, though. I have to give a shout out to Brad. He's one of my former colleagues at PFF. He's a good one, but a lot of them, not so much.
I love it. I love that. It's you know how bad it is when you say agents when we're about to get more snow here in Cincinnati and Jake is enjoying the Canada sunshine. As far as the trenches go, and Locked On Bengals listeners know how much I love the trenches, specifically on the defensive front. Who stood out? Who made an impression? Who should Bengals fans know that did something positive at the Senior Bowl that could be on their radar going into the combine?
So there was really one guy who I would call a top probably 50 pick on the defensive tackle positions. Caleb Banks from Florida. Yeah. To me, he was kind of up and down. And that's kind of what his tape was at Florida too. So I'm not sure he really helped himself. He helped himself in that he looked healthy. And that's probably the biggest thing with him. He's played fewer than 1,000 snaps over 5 years in his collegiate career, played under 100 snaps this past year after breaking his foot. So with him, health is a big issue, but he looked healthy. He has reps that are just like jaw-droppingly dominant. He's 6'6", he's 330, he's explosive, but 6'6" at DT is sometimes a gift and a curse, right? It gives you that long lever arm on first contact, but then it also makes it hard for you to turn, hard to continually play with leverage. And I think you saw that on his tape down there. So he's going to be, I don't want to say a project, but he's kind of a boom or bust sort of DT prospect, which means for the Bengals at 10, he's certainly in play. That's what they love. Right?
Oh, yeah.
He's, like I was actually going to ask. I actually think they're in at 10. Like
I don't think it's crazy. I don't think
you're describing a player that they've drafted the last 2 years, Mike. 1,000 snaps, boomer bust, needs some development, raw tools. Caleb Banks. Do you buy though the chatter? Because there's been chatter since the Senior Bowl. Caleb Banks could be the first defensive tackle drafted. I know you have Peter Woods with a higher evaluation, but then there are all the questions about Peter Woods' productivity. And again, hearkening back to Shamar Stewart, that I think is scary for some Cincinnati fans. Talk about that comparison in chatter this week.
They're completely different types of DTs. So I could see it just because, you know, if you want a penetrating nose tackle, you're not going to draft Peter Woods. It's not who he is. He's more of a 3 technique. He's more a guy that plays outside, just doesn't have near the frame, the largesse that a guy like Caleb Banks does. But to me, I have Woods a lot higher just because I value, especially in the trenches, guys who do it early on in their careers. I think that's a strong indicator of talent. And you watch Clemson this past year, he was not the only one who was checked out for a large portion of the year. And he did not put up first round tape this past fall, but his freshman year was first round tape. His sophomore year was first round tape. Sophomore year was like top 10 tape. He looked so good on that I'll buy into. Again, early production, early in the career, especially at a position as physically demanding as defensive tackle, because, you know, Caleb Banks wasn't even playing when Peter Woods was putting up the sort of years he did, you know, top 10 sort of tape. Caleb Banks wasn't even, you know, his freshman, sophomore year wasn't even in a rotation. So I think that speaks to natural talent. And now you got to ask him, why wasn't the junior, why didn't the progression continue over the course of his career? But I watch Peter Woods, and I think that once he gets to the NFL, once he gets NFL coaching, once he gets more years in a weight room, that he could be special at the NFL level. Whereas I just don't see Caleb Banks. I'm not going to say I don't think he's going to be special, but I don't think he's going to ever be consistent. I think consistency is difficult when you have his sort of physical tools.
Would you consider him at 10? Is that too early? I know it's early in the process.
Peter Woods, I would consider at 10. Caleb Banks, absolutely not. Caleb Banks, back end of the first round this year's class, I'd start to consider it. I bet he goes higher than that. That's just not my type of defensive tackle that I like. You know, a tall nose tackle, it's just hard for those guys to hold up to the rigors of double teams at the NFL level. So, and especially given his injury history and, you know, how old he is. So yeah, Peter Woods, 10's not too early for me. I still believe in the talent there.
Couple of other positions down at the Senior Bowl that I want to get to, including what looked to me like a really deep and talented edge group in Mobile. And of all the positions, this is maybe the first year I want to talk about a linebacker or quote unquote linebacker. And we'll see. I want to get your take on Kyle Lewis here.
Yes.
We'll talk about those couple of positions coming up next year on Locked On Bengals.
Today's show is brought to you by Gusto. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings and managing payroll spreadsheets, and that's where Gusto comes in. It takes the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle or hidden fees. And unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price. That comes with Gusto. I've used Gusto. It's simple. It's easy. You could try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right. 3 months free right now at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time. That's gusto.com/LockedOnNFL.
Locked On Bengals is also sponsored today by FanDuel. I know we're talking about the draft. Maybe you want to look at draft futures, but there's one last football game this season. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on all the NFL action before the season officially comes to a close. And that's Super Bowl 60, where FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it all with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. And whether you're backing the favorite Seattle Seahawks, riding with the underdog, the second-year starting quarterback Drake May, the parallels to Joe Burrow, or maybe you're building one last same-game parlay, FanDuel's there for all of it. You can turn those predictions into plays, stats turn into storylines. Every snap feels bigger. And if you're a new customer, when you bet $5, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if you win. You can make it count because after the Super Bowl, the NFL season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
All right, Mike, let's continue with something Jake mentioned, which is the edge, the defensive end room at the Senior Bowl. That's going to be something, it's just the never-ending conversation here in Cincinnati. Is pass rush in general, who stood out among the defensive ends in Mobile?
I think TJ Parker was probably the best one there. I think he was highest rated on my board going in. And I thought he just had a very solid week. You know, he plays with power. He's a long arm sort of bull rusher type of defensive end. And you saw that translate against good offensive tackles, right? That's always the kind of question you ask with guys who are that type of defensive end. It's like, is he so powerful that it's going to work against grown men? And I think with Parker, you saw that. So I think that was very encouraging for him. I think Zion Young from Missouri as well, similar type, probably going to get drafted a couple rounds later, but you saw him physically manhandle guys at the point of attack as well. So to me, this wasn't a great. So after Parker from Clemson, I don't think there's another guy that maybe goes top 50 from this group. So a lot of the guys who we're going to be talking about is like first round-ish defensive ends, they weren't down there in Mobile. So there wasn't a lot, and there really wasn't anyone who was lower down my board who really was like, oh, okay, that guy looked special down there. That he got to go back and check the tape. So I think it was a week where offensive linemen kind of got the better of them.
That's interesting. I thought that it was a really deep group. Like I said, like more from Michigan, Akis from Illinois looked like he had some pretty nice reps. I went back and watched a little bit of him after the Senior Bowl. Those guys didn't stand out to you in any significant way, I take it?
Well, I just think they're later down the board guys who
sure.
I don't think played any higher than that, I'll just say.
Do you think, I'm just looking back at your previous rankings here, you have TJ Parker one slot ahead of David Bailey. Has that changed at all for you as the process has gone on? David Bailey getting a lot of top 10 hype.
I am not there with David Bailey yet. I haven't done final evals yet. We'll obviously see what they both test like at the combine, but Bailey, to me, I just worry that he's such a speed-based rusher, and that when he went up against guys who could really match his speed, that I was gonna say he disappeared, but he got nullified to a degree. And now speed at the NFL level is, I think, being deployed better than ever by defensive coordinators, and that it can be a weapon all on its own just by, stunt slants, just like asking them to use that speed and not have to win one-on-one. And he'll be productive in a role like that. But as a every down defensive end, I worry about him in the running game. And again, like I said, I think he'll be a boomer bust sort of edge rusher at the next level. Whereas I think Parker just has potential to be more consistent 3-down defensive end.
As a general theme, do you think that is kind of it seems like there's a lot of like designated pass rusher type of guys that end this year?
Yes.
More so than like Ruben Bain, every down guy. TJ Parker could be an every down guy. Is that throughout the class, do you feel like that's like R. Mason Thomas comes to mind, another example of one of these DPR kind of guys?
Yeah, and I think it's because like the trend that we're seeing in the NFL actually was starting in college a few years prior. So they've been selecting for that body type more and more across the landscape. And so I think, yeah, that's like a trend we'll continue to see. We're going to see a lot of these undersized sort of guys who came in, Romello Height came in 234 at the Senior Bowl, who's, a lot of people have him in the top 50, a lot of people have his top 100 guy, but like 234 is just, it's hard to survive at the NFL level. So yes, it'll be interesting to see, one, where these guys go, how the NFL covets them, and two, can they produce still at the NFL level at that size?
Jake mentioned Bain, and so I'm just gonna go there, even though he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. Is he worth the 10th pick? And do you clearly have him ahead of a lot of these other ends that could potentially be there?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's so clearly the best defensive end in this class that, I take him number 2 overall. I think he's that good. I've compared him to Aiden Hutchinson a little in that Aiden Hutchinson got like picked apart because the body type was weird. He's not your traditional defensive end. But when you just watch his tape, you're just like, why is this guy so much better than everyone else? That's how I feel about Bain. He's going to have shorter arms, looks like a defensive tackle, not your prototype, not your Will Anderson where you're like, yeah, that guy, you just can see it. But why is he so good? Why does he, every game you play, no one actually is able to block him consistently? So that's how I feel about Bain. I just think you're getting a very safe defensive end prospect in the NFL. So in a class that doesn't have a lot of safe or a lot of top end talent, he's my top non-quarterback.
I watched 2 players. I mentioned at the beginning, 2.5, maybe 2.5.
Who are they?
David Bailey and Ruben Bain are the 2. And
Okay.
I came in with the same takeaway. I had a mid-first takeaway on Bailey, and I came away like clean top 10 any year, Ruben Bain.
Yep.
So in agreement with you there. Let's talk about Kyle Lewis. Wrap up the Senior Bowl. Maybe we'll hit on some of the safeties around the Senior Bowl as well, because I am curious about your thoughts on the safety class. And I think you mocked Caleb Downs in your most recent mock to the Cincinnati Bengals. So we'll maybe hit on safeties a little bit too. But Caleb Downs, seen by many as a weak linebacker in the NFL, weak side linebacker in the NFL, because that's what he's listed at. He's listed at linebacker, did a lot of overhang stuff at Pitt, and obviously has.
Talking about Kyle Lewis.
Kyle Lewis. What did I say?
Caleb Downs. I just know the Ohio State fans would come at you, so I'm just letting you know.
Too many names in my head all at once. This happens every year at this time of year. James knows. Everydayers know. Kyle Lewis, listed as a weak side linebacker by many who are evaluating him for the draft. Played a lot of overhang, though, at Pitt, and at the Senior Bowl showed that coverage ability. Do you think that he can be used more as that overhang slot defender in the NFL? That's my real question with Kyle Lewis. Is he's listed at the same-ish dimensions as a Nick Emanwuri. I don't think he's going to go test like Nick Emanwuri, but he moves pretty well. Can he be used in that role at the NFL?
I think he's a linebacker. Like, I think he just goes and kicks inside. It's like your weak side linebacker in the NFL. To me, he reminds me of, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. If you'll recall, coming out of Notre Dame, he played the exact same role. Like, he was the overhang in Notre Dame's scheme, and he comes in and he's like 6 foot, 220 something. Ends up being a J2 guy, and was very successful for the Browns before, obviously, neck injury maybe cost him his career. With Lewis, I think that's the path. I don't think he's a slot now. If you want to match with three linebackers against stuff people are doing at the NFL level, maybe like 11 personnel, if that's really something not a lot of teams do, that's not gonna happen. But like, if you play a lot of 3 linebackers and he's your weak side linebacker, you'll feel fine him going out and guarding the slot or being forced on a wide receiver. He's that good, and he had such a good week in coverage, and the one-on-ones is awesome, and he looks like he could be a safety at the NFL level. But I think he's a linebacker because that ability is so much more in demand at linebacker than it would be at safety. And a lot of the other stuff you'll have to do deep as safety, I wouldn't trust him at. So I think he's a linebacker, but man, he's so good in space that I would not put it past him to be a slot at the NFL level if you really needed him to. But like I said, I think especially for the Bengals scheme, he's like a better version of what Barrett Carter, what you wanted him to be. He's just that like rangy cover guy. And so I think for the Bengals, he would be an inside guy.
Better than Barrett. Impossible. Come on, Mike. You can't. No. All right. Let's get into Caleb Downs and some of these safeties. And we got to hit on wide receiver, Jake. I can't believe you didn't mention wide receiver. Of course, we
Trenchman.
Receivers. Trenchman. We'll do that coming up next.
This episode of Locked On Bengals is sponsored by BetterHelp. February can be a lot. Flowers, candy, stuffed animals, so much talk about relationships and that feeling that everyone has it together in their love life. But whether you're married, dating, or single, or just focusing on yourself, most people are figuring it out. No matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off yourself. And look, it's easy to assume everyone else has the perfect relationship, but most people are working through something. And therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing relationships down, can help you communicate better, recognize and implement healthier boundaries, and stop carrying everything alone. And the biggest thing is that it reminds you you're not behind, you're right on time. BetterHelp has licensed therapists in the United States, and they do initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do that at any time, no hassle. You can sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BETTERHELP.com/lockedon.
Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. In fact, TurboTax is here, and it's making things easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day because, well, sometimes it's good to run the ball. You can have your taxes taken care of with TurboTax full service, and a trusted local expert is going to get everything taken care of from start to finish without the stress, without the guesswork. You don't need to spend hours trying to figure out forms. You can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything, W-2s, self-employed forms, and work to get you every deduction. It's a huge time saver and gives you peace of mind. And right now, for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, all you have to do is file this month by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate. Get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today.
Mike, everybody wants Nick Emenworry on their team right now.
Mm-hmm.
He is the guy that we're talking about it for 2 straight segments here. This time we're actually going to talk about a guy that played safety in college, and Caleb Downs, and get a little bit of a feel for the rest of the class too. Where do you see, I mean, different body types, right? But where do you see Caleb Downs at his best in the NFL? What is the best role for him at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's versatile enough that it really, like, the role is that he can make up for whatever you need, right? I mean, you see some guys in the NFL doing Swiss Army knife type stuff, whether it's like Derwin James or Kyle Hamilton, or going back to like when Tyrann Mathieu was first coming out. I think that's what's so special about him, is that just he can wear a lot of hats and fix a lot of ills wherever you need those ills to be fixed. But I kind of am coming around to the value of slot corner as being even more important than safety, because of
and is that how you're categorizing him in worry? You're saying slot corner?
Yes,
is because he's playing in the box or over the slot, so that's essentially like he's got the safety tag on him, but he's not really playing traditional safety.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the weak side linebacker has morphed into when people used to match everything with base. Base is now, 2 linebackers, and your slot corner is has to do a lot of stuff that the weak side linebacker did, but also it's a very important coverage position too, as we've seen. So I think getting those guys around the line of scrimmage to make more plays in the running game that they're adept at doing, Caleb Downs obviously, is a good for you, because safeties nowadays, most teams, they're kind of just their cleanup crew. They are not actively involved in run defense. They are, if everything else goes wrong, they need to make a play. But the slot corner is actively involved, whether it's wide screens, whether it's wide runs. They are a guy that needs to be able to stick their nose in and play like a weak side linebacker used to. So with Caleb Downs' ability, and with Nick Emenworry's ability, it's very valuable when you have a guy that can do that at a high level. So that's how I feel about Downs. Is that I think that's, if I'm a DC and I see his tape and I have that need, that's where I'm plugging him.
Do you think this Bengals team, knowing their defense, and they need everything everywhere. I mean, we've spent time talking about all three levels of their defense. Even if they do and they better sign a free agent safety, whoever it is, Brian Cook or someone like that, you think Caleb Downs could come in and have a significant impact if they picked him 10th and also had a veteran safety that they signed a month prior?
I think so. And just because you need the floor to be raised in the secondary, right? It's not that there's not guys with talent, but there's not anyone you're just like, we know for certain. I know DJ Turner in the scheme obviously was great, but like outside of him, it's just the up and downness of these guys. The inconsistency is so bad that some level of stability there would be awesome. And Caleb Downs, one thing you know about him all the way back to his freshman year at Alabama, it's like the guy is consistent. So yeah, I think it's still, I would still be willing to draft him at 10, even if they sign a safety.
How do you see the rest of the safety class if they can't pick Caleb Downs or don't pick Caleb Downs because they're one of these teams that looks at like the Caleb Downs contract is essentially what they would want to probably pay a veteran. And maybe they're looking for more savings that, you know, whatever the rationale would be. I know that you like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo. How do you see where he's going to be drafted? What the options might be on day 2 if the Bengals are looking outside of the 10th pick for a safety?
I think safety's amongst the 3 to 4 best position groups in this draft class in terms of depth, in terms of year-on-year quality. It's not a great draft class, but I think on day 2, you'll probably have like a half dozen options that are starter quality for you. So that's a good draft class for safety because they don't go that highly, right? And then you got one guy who's probably going to go top 10 to 15 and Caleb Downs. So that makes it a good draft class of safeties. And after Downs, McNeil-Warren to me is the clear-cut number 2 safety in this draft class. He may even go first round, the Toledo safety. Awesome box safety. I think he even could be, he's more similar body type wise to Nick Manwari in that he's big, long, physical around the line of scrimmage. I think he would be maybe not necessarily for pure man cover teams or teams that do a lot of man match, but more zone heavy teams. He would be an awesome slot corner because he is so physical and makes so many plays on the ball around the line of scrimmage. So I think he's clear-cut number 2. After that, I think there's a handful of guys who are very intriguing in certain roles. I would call Dylan Thieneman from Oregon one of those. Genesis Smith from Arizona, another one of those that they're versatile all-around coverage safeties. They can do a lot of different stuff on the back end. So it's a good safety class. It's a good year to be in need of safety. I think there's going to be someone, the 2nd or 3rd round that's a quality player there for you if that's your need.
What are those other positions? You mentioned safety as a top 3 or 4 deepest. What are the others?
The other ones are, I'd say, linebacker is the best position group in this draft class. It's, to me, is potentially the best linebacker draft class I've ever scouted. Started doing this 2015, like real.
You mean the Bengals shouldn't have drafted 2 linebackers?
I'm so annoyed.
Year,
I'm shaking
Mike?
my head, not at you, Mike, at the fact that they just drafted 2 linebackers in a crappy draft class, one that's Mike Renner's age, and now they still have a need at linebacker. And the best linebacker class in a long time.
The guy who will go, so Demetrius Knight, did he go like 49 or 50? What was it?
49. Yeah.
49. The linebacker that will go at 49 this year compared to Demetrius Knight will probably be, I mean, the quality difference will be night and day. Just because there's too many guys to all go first round. We might see like 4 or 5 go first round. It's a crazy good linebacker class. So yes, last year was not a crazy good linebacker class. This year is a good year to draft a linebacker. And even for the Bengals, like I might even still draft one just because that's where the value's going to be in this class.
Yeah,
that's one. And then I do think interior offensive line is probably the other. I think there is a lot of depth, and especially depending on how you view some of these tackles, I think there's probably 3 first-round tackles that I would play at guard at the next level. Francis Mauigoa from Miami, Spencer Fano from Utah, Caden Proctor from Alabama. I think those are NFL guards. So 3 potential first-round tackle to guard converts, 1 more first-round guard in Vega Ioane from Penn State, and a lot of talent on day 2. It's a good interior off the line class, a lot of centers as well. So those are the top 3 positions, my opinion, pretty clear cut.
Trench Man, do you want to ask one question about wide receivers before we get out of here?
Yeah. Where's my guy Cyrus Allen going to go? How impressive was he?
I was not particularly impressed by his
Dang.
Senior Bowl. I actually am more intrigued by Jeff Caldwell.
Yeah.
Just as like an NFL prospect, because freaky athlete, but he didn't look great at the Shrine Bowl either. Unfortunately, his hands were very inconsistent, but he's definitely, he could still go top 100. I think he'll get drafted higher just based off of, he'll blow up the combine. He'll test off the charts. So that'll help him.
6'5", you know, or 6, whatever.
Massive wingspan. So that's, he has a chance to go high, but Allen, I don't think so.
Where's the sweet spot for the Bengals if they're looking for that wide receiver 3 type Andre Yosevich replacement, maybe Andre Yosevich replacement this year? Where do you think they would target a receiver? A good time would be in this draft as of now, of course.
I think you can get one in the 3rd. I think there's a lot of slot types in this class, which is, I'm guessing, where they would want to target. So I think the 3rd round, you'll be able to find a guy in that sort of mold, maybe, 5'10", 5'11", sort of separator type. I think there's a good number of them in this draft class, and they'll be around somewhere in the 3rd round.
The short, shifty king for Joe Burrow. Is there a Tank Dell in this class? I mean, not necessarily going to have that kind of success in the NFL, but
gosh, who's like really small.
Okay, we don't need to go there.
Zachariah Branch is interesting. I think he's from Georgia.
Yeah,
he is small. Now, Tank Dell, one of the interesting things about him was he was short, but had really long arms for his frame. And so that matters more to me as an evaluator, is your wingspan, how far you can actually make plays outside of, the center of your body. But Zachariah Branch, I don't think has that long of a wingspan for being like 5'9".
They need like Khalil Shakir. Like that's what the Bengals could.
There's really Antonio Williams from Clemson. I think will be there around that sort of. I think that's the guy who I would feel really good about if you can get in the 3rd round.
Last one for me, Mike, kind of maybe rapid fire a little bit here. Sonny Styles is obviously the best linebacker in the class, one of the cleaner linebacker prospects we've seen in a while, but the Bengals have also been sold a vision. Bengals fans have been sold a vision of a clean linebacker prospect, and it's going back like 15 years now here. But Sonny Styles at 10, if that's the best option, how comfortable are you? How much of a difference maker can he be in the NFL?
I think he can be very good. I just balk at drafting linebackers in the top 10 for a few reasons. One's they're paid like half as much as wide receivers or pass rushers. You're working with the same money as everyone else. 2, it's a position that we've seen have the longest sort of learning curve at the NFL level. Their learning curve is a lot closer to quarterbacks' learning curves than it is, wide receivers, pass rushers. Those guys can hit the ground running. Whereas linebacker, you need to see a lot of football before you start playing fast enough, as Bengals fans unfortunately know from this past year. But he is a great cover linebacker. He's a great tackler. I don't think he's a great blitzer. And I think if I'm drafting a linebacker top 10, I want, in this NFL, in the way teams are playing defense nowadays, I want a guy who's going to rush the passer at a really high level, because that's where you really separate yourself. That's where, if I have a linebacker who I can put on the line of scrimmage and trust that he'll win like an edge rusher, that creates a lot more problems for offenses than a guy who you just know is going to have to drop in coverage, and he'll be great in coverage, but that's what he has to do. That's why I think Arvell Reese goes higher than him, is because of that ability, even if Sonny Styles was probably the more impactful player for Ohio State last year and the better off-ball linebacker.
Looking for that unicorn. You can find Mike's work over at CBS Sports. He's been doing draft analysis for a long time. Always enjoy having you with us, Mike, and find him on Twitter at @MikeRenner_ for some occasional draft insights as well. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Until next time, thanks for listening. Hoo day, and have a good one.